Welcome to the Agents Lounge podcast, where we talk all things real estate with the industry's top performers. Join us as we dive into the inspiring journeys of successful agents and uncover the secrets to their success. Whether you're a seasoned agent or just starting out, we got the tips and tricks to help you navigate the world of real estate. Brought to you by Integrity Comfort Solutions. So grab a seat and join us in the Agents Lounge.
Welcome back. This is episode 8 of Agents Lounge podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Gaylor, accompanied by co-host Francisco Bermudez Jr., also owner of Integrity Comfort Solutions. And we also have some guests, co-owner and owner, rather than just owners of the Handley Man and Handley Woman, I guess is what we're coining her for this shirt.
Sure.
And this would
Be the Handley Man.
2023, you could do whatever. The focus of today's episode is Mr. Andrew Alanis with 210 SDR. How's it going?
Good. Good to be here.
All right, so before starting, I'd just like to do an icebreaker question. What is the best lightsaber color?
Oh, Grant, of course.
You have one?
Yeah, red.
Red? What? Do you have a what?
I mean, just think of, Rogue One where Darth Vader's in the dark. He just lights up the red lightsaber. That's
It's like,
it. Just automatically sends chills down your spine, and business. And I don't know. I guess the second one, if I were to get away from the dark side, I would probably think it'd be green. I like the green lightsaber. So,
do you have any preference, or all the Star Wars people?
Star Wars people, but there's so many different colors and meanings now. Just like
I'm gonna say invisible so I don't get cut.
I guess for me, pink. They with stickers.
Oh yeah,
Every sticker. Whatever my daughter puts on it.
I've always liked the purple one, but
yeah, that's a good one. That'd be the closest thing to pink.
yeah, the purple. All right, Andrew, so just tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up, what did you do before you got into SDR?
Okay, yeah. So I'm actually born and raised in San Antonio. It's been here all my life. It's kind of my community and my city. I had a career mostly in business analytics and software engineering, which I still do a lot of times, but how I got out into short-term rental, which what STR means is short-term rental, is really kind of, it's one of those businesses that you kind of, pandemic business, you kind of figure out, what can we do to make an extra money? And I started getting into short-terming my own startup home. We and my wife had gotten a new home. And so that's something that we started, and we thought, hey, this is really good, and we really like it. Let's go ahead and do it. And we ended up having my mother and father-in-law who were affected by the pandemic, lost their business in El Paso. That was with the state. And they needed something as well to do, and they had a background in property maintenance and construction. And so we kind of had our ground crew already there inside the family. And so it kind of became a family business from there. Yeah. And once I saw one property do really well, I was kind of just thinking in kind of a business mindset, because it's not the only business I had started.
Yeah.
But I knew that, hey, if something does really well, it doesn't usually last for long. So then you have to really scale out while the good is going. And then when the tough times come, you can already make things efficient and kind of do better than what most people, if you were to go into a bad market or, a slow market.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And we started doing one property stage for over a year, which got us to about 10 properties at some point.
So just a quick question, your first property was your own house? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was a house where I was going to be a landlord, essentially, because we needed to rent it out.
Yeah.
We didn't want to sell it. And we just thought, hey, well, what if we just buy some furniture and, rent out the furniture and make an experience, and maybe we might make a little bit more than you would probably being a landlord.
Yeah. How long did that process take for you? I imagine listeners, they're like, if they wanted to do the same thing that you have done, So you buy a house. How long did you live in it? Like, how long did it take you to actually do that?
Yeah, we lived in it about a couple of years.
Yeah.
Probably about 3 to 4 years, and then we're able to get another house, and then it took about a month or so to month and a half to buy all the furniture and set it up.
Yeah.
But in reality, I guess when you get into something you don't know exactly how much work it's going to be. It's a lot of upside, but you don't really think about all the downsides or all the complaints or what could go wrong in a property.
Yeah, all the things you can't think about.
Yeah, it's just and so what I think about with short-term rental or any other type of rentals, most people think it's really easy at first, and then once they get into it, usually kind of wears off after a few months because then they realize they're in a subsection of property management, and what can go wrong will go wrong, and you have to be the one that services it. It's a little bit different than a long-term tenant because a long-term tenant is living and they can kind of wait a little bit, but someone who's paying for a stay wants you to come fix it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or give you a refund.
Yeah.
So it's a much more hands-on type of renting.
Just a random question. Are y'all buyers and y'all have your own place?
Yeah, we have
We own our own home.
Yeah.
We basically service and maintenance other people's properties. We don't own any properties of our own.
Really?
Yeah. Although, I did help a friend manage an Airbnb for a little while. And so, I do have experience with that. It's an interesting market to get into because I would say one of the things I saw is that, it seemed like the quality of the, in some ways I saw, the structure being maintained a lot better, because you're going in, as soon as they check out, you're cleaning up, as opposed to when you have a long-term renter and things deteriorate.
Oh, yeah.
But if you don't stay on top of that, though, and you start neglecting it, it goes downhill pretty fast. Yeah.
So that's something I didn't think about until you just mentioned it. The turnover, I guess, is so quick, right? I feel like it might. Does that help with the maintenance of the place? Is there the same kind of check-in process for somebody that's staying in an Airbnb for a month as to somebody who's renting for a year?
There's a lot more stuff that goes wrong if you have somebody rented out for a whole year.
Yeah.
Because stuff just falls apart and they just don't even talk to you about it. And
yeah.
So
it's more of a headache unless it's an emergency, I guess, right? So
yeah, they just live with it. It's and then you come in after they moved out, you're like, there's mold everywhere. And they're like, yeah, we had a leak.
Yeah. It's just, just a little bit of mold.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I think you're right. A lot of people are amazed about when they first hear it, because they don't think about that. I always tell them it's actually a benefit that you have someone coming in and renting short term or mid term or 30 days or more, because now you have those quicker places where you're going to have to check in and make sure QA everything works and no leaks. And when I first started, so just so you know, when we expanded, we did not buy 9 or 10 homes in a year. We just don't have the capital of that. We started working much like they mentioned. What I do is more for service now. We start working with landlords to either be a renter in that stage or service ones that are already furnished. And what's interesting is that a lot of landlords would say, well, why should you should pay me more rent? I'm like, actually, I should get a deal because I'm maintaining your home a lot better than you would having a year-long tenant for exactly those reasons, that we're maintaining and we're keeping an eye on it, we're cleaning it every single week.
Yeah, that's a great point. So that would be a comparative advantage.
Yes. Yeah, that would be this is why I would be a fit tenant, or this is why you should do this, because it's actually, when people, they might think that, people are going to be short-term renting or in and out all the time, and so that's going to make more rent care. It's actually better because you're going to have service people in there all the time. It's actually going to keep your asset a lot nicer over time.
It's a different style of wear and tear, but also it's quicker and easier to catch that wear and tear and maintain versus a lot of homeowners, a lot of renters, long-term renters. They don't maintain that they live with something until they can't live with it anymore and then have a substantial repair bill. Right. Whereas a short-term renter, in and out, and then you go in and you see, oh, I can do some preventative maintenance here.
Yeah.
As a property management, and then
Yeah.
far cheaper.
And I found it's a trade-off. You do have to deal with more frequent complaints. So when you have a long-term renter, it feels good because, like, man, you can just, cool, you're getting your check on a monthly basis. You're moving on with your life. You're not even paying attention.
Right.
Right. But it is a trade-off because after they move out, you're like, ooh, yeah, I wish I would have known about that before all my property went to
back then. Yeah. So you can get that year pretty like coasting for the most part, I would say. And
Yeah.
Hold on to those rental chances without and pay for all the repairs because it gets pricey.
yeah.
And every landlord who has rents it up on long term knows this exact thing. You know, it's always when they move out. That's when you get to do the work because you're lucky if you get a renter who was completely clean and did everything correct.
So I'm kind of curious so for like short-term rentals, what's the process for screening new tenants?
Okay, so I love that you said short-term rental first of all because Airbnb has become such a big like a brand in the industry.
Yes.
But in reality, there's much more platforms in Airbnb now. There's a lot of other platforms. There's a lot of direct booking websites. There's a big movement for a lot of hosts and people who do short-term rentals to just make their own website and they'll pay the platform fee.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of sites like Boostly and other things like that. Mark Simpson has been a big movement on that. But short-term rental, the good thing about Airbnb is that they do all the background checks. I don't know if you've noticed if you ever put a profile, but they do a lot of screening and they take care of the payments for them.
Yeah.
Right. But whenever we get customers outside of that, we go through, we personally, our company goes through a vendor called Know Your Guest. And I think the company was called Super Hot for a bit, that they rebranded to Know Your Guest. Mm-hmm. And they essentially are the same thing, but they also handle the damage waiver or the security deposit. And so it's kind of a service they provide. So we essentially, when they book with us on our website or through any of these other platforms, because VRBO doesn't do a background check as much as they like to say. I mean, they probably do, but it's not as, from what we've seen, it's not as significant as Airbnb.
Really? And Airbnb is pretty good with it.
Yeah,
I've used Airbnb before, but I didn't feel like I was getting like my credit background checked and
Yeah, but I feel like one of the things Airbnb builds in is like constantly asking for user experience and, that boosts up your profile. And so the minute that something goes wrong, it's going to affect your profile and it's going to affect your ability to book another one.
Yes, and the reviewing system is a lot better in Airbnb, and of course there's an algorithm that says they don't admit this, but bad guests get usually book with bad hosts. They gotta match good hosts with good guests because they want everyone to be happy, right? And so, but a lot of the other ones they don't really do that. It's just kind of a booking platform like Booking.com. And so I remember we've had some bookings, and Booking.com has a lot more, credit card. Like you have to go check on a credit card. Or it is indeed, who they say they are. You have to do ID check. And so we just went, let's just have Know Your Guest do that. And that way, no matter where it comes from, Know Your Guest does a lot, even bigger background check and ID check and all that stuff. And it just kind of took that out of our hands. And what's great is that they're actually, and this is not an advertisement for them at all, but it's just a good product. That I think they end up offering some insurance that's a lot cheaper than most insurance because the ones they screen, they have the data for. And so, like, if they say this person's not good to come into your place and you still let them, then they're not going to. Not really cover their insurances and stuff like that.
So you always allow. Yeah, that's interesting. It's so I have some like questions popping in my head that y'all are provoking. So naturally, you always think about like bad guests coming in or like just irresponsible or whatever it is. What does a bad host look like most of the time? If you could generalize a bad host,
I would like to hear what they think because they've been hosted before.
Well, we did maintenance.
We did maintenance for, So that's the thing is you call us when things break. So a bad host is somebody who doesn't go in and fix things when things break. So we're concerned.
The minimum required. So a bad guest, I can give you an example, is they didn't let us know about things when we were helping with this Airbnb. And then when we did the clean out for them, it was like we had to clean out this Airbnb that had hoarders in it. They were hoarding the pizza boxes with pizza crust still in it from 9 months ago.
Oh, yeah.
Snapped up and things like that. I had to strip and basically try to save a gorgeous butcher block countertop
That was the sad thing.
that was destroyed.
This was for some friends who turned their home into an Airbnb, and they had, you know, they had antiques, they had linens, they had like, you know,
Like proper lint.
they have nice things that basically just,
Just
come destroy.
No, that's okay. And that is never a question.
It has to be that this guest was there for extended time, not
Yeah, exactly, right? Designs a thing. That's
This was college kids, and they made the mistake of opening up their Airbnb to longer term.
well. I mean, yeah, it was a mistake, but all mistake, right? It's business owners, right? That's the thing about mistakes. They're learning opportunities. Is like it was a response, but it was a response to COVID. People weren't traveling, and so like, how are you going to like maintain your income? And unfortunately, that also came with yeah.
So one of the things I tell people who are going into being a host and buying furniture, I absolutely adore those short-term rentals and Airbnbs that have like antique and like their unique stays. They definitely need to charge the most for that because that's just awesome stuff. But generally, what my company has been at is the average run in a day type of family experience and travel, because San Antonio is a very travel oriented city, and then we're also very family oriented. And that's kind of been our bread and butter. And a lot of times with other owners who have maybe 3 to 4 bedrooms, which is a very family oriented stay, I tell them, hey, get sturdy, reliable furniture as things that you don't have any emotion toward, but that they're also going to look modern and nice and in style.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't have to break the paint to get them, because I've also heard from other people who have done this in other cities, and they go out and they get even nicer furniture sometimes than they have in their own home. Yeah, thinking that they're gonna milk it, and I'm like, no, people will just damage and break it because they're going in and out, you know. And unless you're aiming for a luxury experience, which if you're getting started out in any kind of real estate or long-term, mid-term, or short-term, luxury is nice, but that's usually not where people start.
Yeah, and if you're going to get into that space, I would say, like, yeah, I would totally agree with you about not spending your money on high-end furniture or anything like that, because we love using Airbnb, you know,
We've stayed at the nice ones that have the antiques and all that, but you're afraid to mess with it. And when those guests that aren't afraid to mess with things because they don't care.
the best experience that you've ever had. I mean, for the most part, it's just a nice, clean space, well-maintained,
Fairly empty.
you know,
Minimal.
but with just really mindful touches, right? So like,
A basket of
we had a great experience at an Airbnb in Rockport that like made it a point to like have like set out like beach toys and like a little cooler and like a volleyball for you to take with you when you go to the beach.
Yes.
You know,
and you can tell they didn't spend a lot of money on it. It's cheap.
IKEA furniture, but just all the red and little things that you need like right where you need them.
It's, one of those ones can go a long way. Right? It doesn't have to be like you were saying, high end stuff.
Yeah.
If you put fruit out or just some like basic breakfast stuff for them, then that goes like that a long way too. Like it's very,
Or even, yeah, like I said, or because the thing is like if we're rating and putting on my business owner, like if you want it really to get into this space, maybe don't do that. I mean, just be mindful of the fact that like if you're going to constantly provide snacks and stuff out there, that's going to be a reoccurring charge, right?
Yeah.
But
And you also have to be mindful of people that have food allergies.
But if you want to add a few little touches and you're creating a space that's more family friendly, maybe set aside some games or some interesting board games, some interesting books. Like just things like that. Because
Especially kids.
on a vacation setting, like you love playing with somebody else's stuff. It's fun.
Kids say go to books that they've never seen before.
And toys that they've never played with before. Yeah.
Even if it's a toy they have at home, they will go nuts over because, a toy. I don't even play with this at home anymore, but this is cool. I get to see.
Or what's cool is, I think like there's one that we went to that had like the little 3D viewer, and we're like, they like must have actually gone to a thrift store and just found some cool stuff from the 80s, and we're like, man, we had that when I was a kid.
And our kids went nuts over it.
Yeah.
Francisco, sorry, did you have a favorite? Do you use Airbnb when you travel?
I was going to, but no, I usually stay at Hilton somewhere.
Oh, that's barter.
What's interesting is that people say, it is a competitor a little bit to hotel, but it's actually very different because you get like a whole kitchen and you get a whole we've actually been experimenting a little bit with converting homes, and these will be more outside the city limits, but converting homes into more professional stays where it's like per room for people who are coming to travel.
Yes.
And that would be kind of akin to a bed and breakfast or a room. But that's a different experience of having a whole room to yourself with there.
And I have a question for you. So there's a lot of landlords in San Antonio, right? What would push them to go into a short-term rental, and what's the difference between doing it themselves versus hiring somebody like you?
Okay. So what would push them to come into short-term, mid-term is because some landlords, they don't know about the benefits of maintaining their home, right? What we just kind of talked about earlier is a big selling point, because honestly, I was a landlord and I've had renters long term, and when I had this first home, I was kind of scared to let renters again be there for a whole year or two. Even though it's passive income, it's not really as much of a cash flow as you would think, because you have to keep money back to maintain a home. And so a lot of people think, well, if I go to rent to midterm, that's going to produce a lot more cash flow, right? I may have to invest a little bit into furniture, but I can make that back in about 2 or 3 years. And we've been operating for that long, and there's been still places that we still have the original furniture. They've been well maintained. So that's one of the things. And so they're looking at a bigger cash flow. And then the other question that you had was
Doing it themselves versus hiring a company like yourself.
Well, doing it yourselves, we went through a whole discussion about what you can do for all these little things to make an amazing experience. And believe me, if this is something where you're by yourself and we have one listing or one home that you can kind of maintain, you can do all of that. Once you get to 3 or 4, it becomes a full-time job to do that exactly at that level. And so I would say, I always tell people, if you're going to start it, please get somewhere that's within like 5-minute drive of you. Don't try to get somewhere on the opposite side of town if you can help it, because after you set it up, you are going to get annoyed by some of the things that come up. And some of them can be just simple things, but a lot of people like to be there and make sure the guest is taken care of, right? And so that's where I would say, if you don't feel like you can commit that amount of time, then have a full service operator do it for you. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I'll just get the cheapest operator out there. Here's the thing. When operators, they come and help you, they do a percentage off of gross sales, okay? Which is a pros and cons. Pro is they're actually incentivized to increase your revenue, actually. And most of them probably know how to increase the revenue of a place and give a better experience more than you do, because they've probably been hosting a lot longer, and they've probably been in the industry a lot longer. And so I would say that that percentage, based on what you decide and you negotiate with them, the higher it is, the more they're actually going to be incentivized to only work for you to make sure that they're getting more of a cut. And so it's a little bit different than the mindset of trying to I'm trying to bid for the lowest contractor, right? And I always tell people, well, if you go with someone that's going to say, I'll charge 10% of the gross nightly bookings, and you only get $40,000 a year, but then you go and say, oh, this guy's going to make you $80,000 a year in bookings, but he's charging 30%. Do the math, which one is actually going to give you more money? It's going to be the 30%. And so in that kind of scenario, it's actually good to not really look at the percentage as much as how much experience how they are. Are they booked in their calendars? Like, look at all their listings. They need to be booked 2 months out. If you ever see a host that has an open calendar in any of their listings, I would question them on that. Why aren't you reducing prices? Why aren't you getting occupied? And so those are some of the things that can kind of help someone decide, oh, I'm good at operating. You want someone local.
Yeah.
Don't try to get someone who's going to be a national company, because they may help you a little bit, but you're still going to end up doing things yourself because they're not local.
Yeah. Well, me from if I owned a property, that's just too much work. Yeah, I really have time to work from 8 to 5 and then spend time with family. Imagine responding to emails, fixing things, responding at night. Like, I think it's definitely worth it to hire somebody to manage it pretty.
Yeah. And if you think about it, I mean, if you have no mortgage and you just have to pay property tax, as long as you get a little bit more than the property tax, you're great. If you get a little bit more than the mortgage back, you're great. So quibbling about the percentage that you're paying to the management company becomes like, as long as you're getting a little bit more than your mortgage and they're managing everything, the maintenance, the repairs, the customer bookings, as long as you're getting, like, let's say you get $50 a month over your mortgage on this, but you don't, it's basically hands off. That's $50 you didn't have before, and you're not really doing anything but paying the mortgage.
And now you get equity.
Yeah.
For basically nothing.
And then if you can build that up, even if you still have a mortgage on that property, a lot of mortgage companies will look at, okay, he's had that property for like 2-3 years. It's doing really well for him. And then he gets decided to go buy another property and do the same thing. They're going to be all about it. And you can get more properties, and then you can hand that to that management company. That management company is going to be like, oh, yes, another opportunity at that same rate. Awesome. Let's do it, because we're going to make even more. And you can grow yourself, and you can grow that management business together. And the more properties you have, and the more properties that the management group is managing for you, the less they're going to manage for other people, and then the more they're going to focus on you, and you're going to continue to grow.
I think your services are really great to incorporate into like what I would call like sort of more of like a blue collar wealth management strategy. A lot of people always like to talk about your side hustle and passive income. It's such like a great buzzword, but passive income is not passive at all, right? And so, but I think that if this is a space that you want to get into, yeah, basically, if what you're really getting into is more along the lines of real estate investment and wanting to keep a real estate purchase as something that you're going to develop in your portfolio, right? And you don't have the time, though, to be changing the sheets and fixing the light fixtures and fixing the broken furniture, then yeah, definitely like utilizing those services. You just bake that into the cake. Maybe you're not making as much money right now in the short term, right? But you're preserving your assets in the long term.
It's like having a stockbroker, but for real estate. And in all honesty, it's actually a safer bet, because you can't tell what stock.
Real estate's
it's always
tangible, yeah.
Tangible. And it's also always, for the most part, the price of property goes up, especially if you're making smart decisions when you do purchase property, and then you're making the smart decision to which property company to manage it for you. And then
there's some risk, right? You just have to know the risk.
But that's the thing is, know your risk. As always, you're picking the right people. And then if you ever have to sell a property because you need a quick buck, that's easier than selling real estate.
It's show ready.
So this is kind of where I can at least give my little spiel while I can, because I feel like we always start a business, what's your competitive advantage, right? What makes you different than any other? There's a lot of hosts and a lot of operators out in San Antonio, and I've actually met a lot of them in the San Antonio, Austin area, because we like to just trade tips and help each other in the community. With what we do, especially what I like to do with the owners, is I give them a long-term plan. I say, hey, initially you can sign with me for a couple of months with our contract. We can redo the contract anytime. There's no cancellation fee, nothing. You can leave me whenever you want, right? Make it very flexible. But a lot of times I have about a 2 or 3 year plan I go over with them, and I say, first things first, let's get you on the major OTA. Let's go ahead and put you on Airbnb. Once you get that done in 2 or 3 months, we're going to work on your behalf, because we get a percentage, so we want to work to make it more revenue. And so we're going to put it on a lot of other platforms as well as Airbnb. And now we're going to start getting more of your emails and for either to where you own the customers. And so at that point, you're now thinking, wow, we're actually owning the customer data. And then I'm going to say, after 6 months, you can re-email those customers and ask for referrals, ask for people who are coming in to need a stay. And then at that point, you go into direct booking websites. And now after a year, whereas when you started, you probably had maybe 70 to 80% of your bookings on Airbnb. A year or two from now, you have only 20 to 30% of your bookings coming from Airbnb or VRBO or any of those big platforms. And so what I just did for you as an operator over 2 or 3 years is now I've given you an asset that has an email list, that has a customer list. And now you have bookings far out and are not just from Airbnb, but are your own direct bookings that come from referrals. Because we've been operating 3 years. We get a lot of return customers. If you provide a good experience, a clean experience, it's maintained, people want to go back to that if they come to San Antonio. Because guess what? They don't want to guess how their experience is going to be with the new hosts. I have heard some host horror stories, kind of like what you guys have said. And I'm very wary of new hosts that I try to pick on Airbnb when I travel too. Because I don't want to come to a place that has like a leaky roof or something, you know?
Yeah.
And so for the landlord, I'm telling them that's my 2 or 3 year plan. And guess what? In 3 years, if you want to sell that home, you're not just selling the home. You're now showing them that you have bookings 2 months out, and they're all direct bookings.
Right.
And now that's actually worth more than just the home. Yes, you're selling that investment business essentially, and that's something that I feel like is our competitive advantage, is because no one really talks about that. I'm more in it for the owners to get the most out of this in this business relationship than it is about me just getting my cut.
Right. And you're explaining where the bookings are coming from. So I feel like that's really helpful. We are kind of running short on time, but I do have one more question that's kind of for, I guess, everyone is, I guess, Heaven and Andrew for sure. But have you ever faced any ethical dilemmas during your property management experience? All the time.
Not really ethical. It's more treating people the way you would want to be treated, right?
Yeah.
Everything that you do, right? And you got to try to put yourself in the customer situation.
Yeah.
And when you say ethical, it's more like, that you have to choose between good and bad. It's really about how would I like to be treated if I was in your customer's shoes? And a lot of times, what I found the 2 major things is putting your expectations clear in the beginning with the landlord and the guests in your messaging and your communication. And then 2, one is taking your expectations and having good expectations, setting those correctly. And then the other one is communicating it effectively.
So like, yeah, you have somebody that stays at somebody's location, right, that you're managing, and they're like, it has a weird smell. I didn't enjoy it. It made me nauseous, and I get some money back. So I don't know. Like I'm just personally.
This is actually in general business, right? I mean, in D2D, you guys probably get this, and handyman services, you probably get this. I wasn't satisfied. Personally, for me, now that I've owned a business, I come from the business side. I've been in that customer's shoes as well, wanting to get something. It depends. If you have good agreements and contracts, you can kind of define what is, like able to get refunds for.
So it has to be like, thorough.
Again, your expectations have to be upfront with the customer, right? And so we had a bad experience. The weird thing now, I would say it'd be something that's a concern, but my first thing I would draw out is that, did you give us a chance to go and mitigate it right away? And because it's one thing to have a bad smell and then complain about it and expect a refund, and then have a bad smell and complain about it, and then we responded immediately and send someone to ozone that place to figure out what.
Right, yeah.
And now we've recovered that experience, and now, is there really need for a refund?
Exactly, yeah, that's a good point.
It's like going to a restaurant, eating all the food and saying, there was a hair. Yeah, versus, seeing the hair and calling the waiter over and getting the food immediately. Yeah. So that if they contact you right away and give you a chance to go and fix the issue, and as a courtesy we can do this, great. But if they don't, then
Yeah.
you do.
I would say, like, regardless of your industry, right? You want your customer to have a good experience.
Yeah.
Right. And so I feel like Daniel and I are definitely both the kinds of people that will really beat ourselves up if a customer doesn't have a good experience. Right. And so to a certain extent, you're willing to, in some situations, you're willing to take a little bit of a loss or whatever. Probably in our case, because it's like crazy guilt or whatever. But it's also brand preservation too, And so yeah. So, I mean,
what can one bad review do to you?
Yeah, it's that. Although at the same time, though, there are some people that are just, you can tell they're not going to make the pot.
Out of blood, yeah.
Yeah. So there's also people that take advantage too.
Yeah, they're doing that. Look at that. There's nothing you can do about it. And so there's people that either come into it with an attitude of, I'm just not going to be happy, and they're going to try to take advantage. There's some people that go into it and they just have a bad experience, and there's nothing you can do and fix that. And then there's people that have a bad experience, tell you about it, you go in and try to fix it, and they can see that you're making an effort, and they're going to be appreciative of what you can offer,
right? And
you build a relationship out of those. The first two, there's nothing you can do. If you offer to do what you can do, and they're not accepting of it, that's
under your,
you can't do anything.
Yeah, and those situations, all you can do is like do the best you can to, like, in your good conscience, know that you try to serve them to the best of your ability, and then also document it, right? So that way, like, if they write a bad review or they try to take you to small claims court or whatever, it's like, look, you just respond to the bad review and say, I did this to try to make you happy. And you just put it publicly out there so everybody can see your case.
I feel like he has to have operations so efficient enough that you should feel confident if someone wants to take you to small claims court, because you're like, yeah, we have the document that cleans it out. So where, you're really not, we don't have a lot of face here because we did everything reasonable, right?
Yeah.
So that a lot of people have fears on bad reviews and even going small claims court.
Yeah.
It doesn't really bother me, because if you put in the effort to put the expectations, you put in the effort to put everything, then you're covered. Then that probably is something that happens very rarely. And so that's not something really you should be worried about.
After a while, you get used to it.
Yeah, you're kind of used to that hard skin and everything of that. And unfortunately, that's also what you learn by running the business.
Yeah, right. Dealing with people in general.
Yeah.
And yes, judges will be able to sniff out people wanting to just roast you for nothing, or if there's a viable or a proper problem and that you need to go fix. And most judges, they've been around the block so many times that if you're doing everything right, all you do is just show up, let the judge deal with it, and then at that point, it's definitely out of your hands. It's just let the judge do his job.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, but that is actually going to wrap it up for episode 8. Thank you, Heaven, Daniel, Andrew, for coming by, taking time out of your day on a Friday to give us some valuable information. Hopefully people listen to this.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Good for you.
You've been listening to the Agents Lounge podcast, brought to you by Airtegrity Comfort Solutions. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or to listen to past episodes, please visit agentsloungepodcast.com.